Is authorized to call to order, I guess it might be me. We're calling this meeting to order, and I'm looking for, let's see, do we do approval of minutes or public comments first, Jess? I think it's in minutes, right? I think.
The last agenda says public comment.
Okay.
First.
So let's do, let's jump into public comment. So this is the time to comment on any non-agenda matter falling within the scope of the Integrated Water Resource Planning Committee. There will also be time for public comment in conjunction with each agenda item in which a formal recommendation or decision is being made, but you may only speak once per topic. Please note the committee cannot take action on any item which does not appear on the agenda. All persons addressing the committee shall speak in a civil and courteous manner, and members of the audience shall be respectful of others. Please state your name and place of residence in an audible tone of voice for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. General public comments to the committee can be found on their Laserfish repository page. So, as looking for members of the audience who might want to step forward and make public comment, seeing shaking heads in the no direction, I'll move on to the next portion here, which is, I believe, the approval of minutes. So do we have anybody who's willing to make the motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Drafted, I didn't see any comparison.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Let's see. So we want to just kind of share with you guys the project timeline. Where are we in the process? You've signed up for many hours of work, both in this room and outside this room. So we like to try to give you a touch point of where you are. So we've put together kind of a little bit of a wayfinding map for you. So we're here where we'll be talking today about the tiered concept alternatives. So we're hopefully going to emerge from this with strong direction for AE2S to come back and do their technical and study results. That will take 6, 8, 10 weeks for them to do that work, and we'll meet one time in between that period, and then we'll see how things go. At that point, when the AE2S is done with their work, they're going to come back, and his team's going to come back with their findings, and then we're going to just discuss them all again in this particular forum. That's also when we feel we'll have enough volume of qualitative and quantitative information to go out to the public and host a series of open houses, maybe an online survey, maybe different forms of engagement to get your friends and neighbors in the community to look at the results of AE2S's work. And then, once we have those public meetings and we come back to you all and hopefully get consensus on which of the alternatives you guys feel should be recommended to commission, we will get on the commission's calendar to present those items to them for their consideration and adoption. Does that make sense? We're expecting that last piece to happen before, well, certainly in this calendar year. So, want to move on to...
One question on that. So, in terms of the public outreach and comments from the public, will you guys be summarizing those for the group?
That's a really good point, and something I pulled off that when I said broad public input, that used to say, will the WAC will consider public input in their decision making. I didn't want to be presumptive, but it's good to hear that you guys are interested in hearing that feedback. So absolutely, good point. We'll come back with kind of a summarized version of that public feedback. We'll also make sure that you each get invitations to every single open house and outreach event. We'd love to have you join for that and joining the conversations that take place there, having you with a much deeper level of knowledge than most people who will be in that room. So we'll certainly keep you guys on the invite list for those. Yeah, Tim?
So 2 things. Are you going to present to us the materials that you're going to then present to the public so that we could possibly provide some sort of comments on it with regard to, maybe you need more clarification, or because I mean we've been looking at this in depth, and we've had a lot of these questions, and we've been, massaging it and keep going back and forth, but sometimes I think so much of this is so technical that you don't want to overwhelm the public, but also you don't want to go too light on it and let them know that, what the depth is behind it. So there's kind of a balance there. So I don't know
Tell me
if
about it.
you're going to kind of like throw it back at us and say, hey, what do you think? Is the public, is this a good platform to submit to the public?
Let me take that under advisement. I definitely agree with you that there's a balance. I'm not sure what the timeline will be between getting AE2S's information, sharing it with this group, and then making sure the same information is shared with the public, and maybe, like you said, a slightly different flavor or different approach or vector. But I hear you that you guys could be a valuable resource in helping us understand if that's what we're planning to communicate has a good chance of being understood. Thank you.
And then the second thing, this is a question kind of going through my mind, and this is the engineer in me. As I'm looking at these alternatives, I know that we've gone through the cultural and environmental and social and economic aspects of it, but right now as we move forward, the number one thing that I keep going back to is looking at these alternatives and saying, how many acre feet of water does any one of these alternatives provide us? And then what is the cost per, estimated, and that's a really widespread term. What is the estimated cost per acre feet of water that we would then expect for that alternative? So obviously, we have a pretty good idea of how many acre feet of water it is to go and capture the water from Canyon Ferry, because that's already allocated. But a lot of these other ones, we're dealing with concepts, and that's all great, but as we start to kind of really make some harder decisions, and again, from my perspective, the engineering behind it is to say, well, this is the most cost-effective and yet realistic and meeting all those other guidelines, whereas something else would be like, yeah, that's great, but we're really not going to get that much water, or it's going to cost us way too much at the same time. So I would assume you guys are going somewhere with that, but I guess for me, sooner the better. So as I look at these alternatives, I have a better focus on where that rises or lowers to the priority level.
Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, more from the perspective of what was completed in 2013. The IWRP, so that document, which you all have, Appendix C, has the very detailed cost per acre foot for capital costs and O&M costs for each of the alternatives that were evaluated then. So I'll talk about that a little. You can refer to that in more detail. But then we're going to do the same thing for whatever tier 1 and tier 2 alternatives we come up with today, and then come back to you all, like Matt said, in 10 weeks. I'm going to give myself 10 weeks.
Good.
To talk about the new results, the updated results of cost per acre foot.
Yeah.
And then you'll have the opportunity to kind of take all those options and be like, these are the ones that we recommend as a WAC to commission. So I understand it's kind of hard at this point without hard numbers, but we're still
And I don't even expect hard numbers, because the amount of time that would have to be put in to get even, good ballpark numbers is a lot of work into itself.
Yeah, and we'll get into it, but we can talk a little bit today about that.
Great.
Yeah, that's an important metric, and it's something that, one of the reasons, because it's so much work, is why we wanted to winnow down the alternatives that just on their face don't make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, that'll be part of a kind of a cornucopia of metrics that each one of these would be measured against. And then this group's job to say, I imagine, in my world, this isn't decided yet, but in my world, I would prefer that the engineering team come forward with recommendations for you guys to say yay or nay. There are other voices at the table who might want to be the ones who put that buffet together and be the ones that actually put it together. So we'll just feel our way on that. We want to make sure we get you guys, we want, again, balance, right? We want to make sure that you guys feel like you've had a ton of input on this process and that the outcome is yours. But we also don't want to overly burden you with things and burn you out and make you never volunteer for another one of these again in your life. So we want to try to find a balance between that, and I think we'll get there. Just wanted to note our friend Clayton's in the room. Welcome, Clayton.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Sorry, I'm running late.
Quite all right. Without anything further, I wanted to see about diving into where we came down with the results of the survey. So there are 12 of you on the WAC. This next number does not come with any judgment or anything. 7 of you completed your homework. I will protect the guilty throughout this entire process. Of those who completed the homework, 5 of you had changes or recommendations or opinions on shifting an alternative either up or down into the tiers, okay? So what I'm looking at, when I can, my view of this is that there are plenty of people in here who left the last meeting and said, everything's good, I'm good, everything's fine. There are people in here that said, I've got some changes, and there's some things I feel strongly about, and we're going to go through those today and discuss those. There are others who went through the homework and said, everything looks good, I'm good, and signed out. So I'm going to do kind of like Family Feud here. So how many do we think got recommended to move from our draft tier 1 to move to either 2 or 3? How many alternatives? Any guesses? Any guesses how many we're going to talk about today about moving from tier 1 to another tier?
0.
3? We got 3? 3?
0.
0. I was going to go 3.
Nobody's going to do Price is Right rules and do 1?
I'll go 4.
Okay. We have 1 to talk about today. Moving from.
We have 1? Okay.
Well, hang on. It's going to be a longer day than that.
Okay.
So we have a conversation to talk about moving the Highlight Dam into a different tier. How many feel like we had votes to move tier 2 items either down or up?
Oh, I thought it was 1. And sorry,
No.
I'm going to guess 3.
Okay.
0.
0. There's cheaters. There's people who don't do their homework, and there's cheaters. 2 is the magic number we're going to be talking about here, okay? No cheating. How about tier 3? How many votes do we get to move stuff from tier 3 to any other tier?
1.
0.
Price is Right rules?
2.
3.
3, okay.
1A. Oh, man.
Oh,
6.
wow.
So, and what this, obviously, since it's tier 3, these are arguments to move these either up to 2 or up to 1, right? So, I don't mean for you to be able to read the thing on the left, but I just wanted a graphical representation of how many people who did their homework and recommended changes wanted things to move around versus those who didn't do their homework or did their homework and said no changes. So what we're seeing here is there's a minority in the room who would like to have a conversation about moving 1 or more of these items into a different tier. You can see the majority in the room was fine with it being where it was.
Just for clarification, those tier 3 ones that were highlighted, those were being proposed to be moved to another tier or just to be eliminated?
No, I mean, those are being,
Nothing eliminated.
we'll go through a little bit more detail, but yeah, none of them are at this point being recommended to be eliminated. Although the tier 3, as you guys heard, was kind of like saying, to us, don't spend a whole lot of time looking at these because we don't think they're viable, and we need you to spend your valuable time on other more viable projects. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. So this slide just is me sharing that I feel like the onus is on the individuals in the room who are recommending a project move to a different tier. The burden's on them to convince the group that it should be moved. The good news is there's no cost to you to say yes or no to move it, but we wanted to focus our conversation today on these, which is just the differences. And if you look at this as a slice of pie compared to all the things that we agreed on, this is infinitesimal, right? Our disagreements. But that's the value of this group, is bringing different ideas to the table and having different individuals be able to say, I prefer this, or I'd like this to be studied more. So what we're planning on doing today is letting kind of the A2S and the city team discuss that particular item and state, describe a little bit their rationale behind why they put it in the draft tier that they put it. And then we wanted to open up the conversation to the group to say, yeah, it does feel mistiered, or you got, actually, now that I hear more details, you guys, it feels right. Does that make sense? And I won't put anybody on the spot. I don't personally know who made the requests to move things between tiers. And so it's just going to be a conversation about that. And the stakes are very low, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, all these things are going to be looked at. It's just a question of what detail we're going to, and how many resources we're going to spend on looking at these specific alternatives. Is everything making sense? Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm going on and on. So, yeah, Tim?
When I went through it, GW3 and GW4 were not on the overall list to be moved up or down.
Oh, really?
So they were just simply missing. So,
oh.
And they'd written in, I wasn't sure if that somehow got incorporated in, GW1, 2, or GW5. So, but they were just simply missing. So,
I would say that they were just missing. I don't have any knowledge of them being consolidated.
Okay.
We didn't consolidate any options into one, so.
Okay. So they're, I don't know where they are.
I'll ask McKenna, who's my colleague working behind the scenes. McKenna, would you mind just reviewing the homework results and just confirming whether those particular alternatives happen to miss the queue there?
Yeah, that was GW3 and 4.
Affirmative.
Okay.
I think we can speak to that a bit.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe that GW3 and 4 were kind of consolidated into GW1, GW5, within and without outside the city's plan boundary.
That's kind of what I was figuring, is that they could be dovetailed into one or the other based on if you're just looking at boundaries. It didn't matter if it was shallow or deep aquifers. So, but there was, I was like, wait a minute.
Well, good catch.
Nothing there, and no explanation.
So yeah, my apologies for not knowing that was consolidated.
Okay.
So I'm gonna, this is where you guys might have to squint, but hopefully the printouts are a little bit more clear. So I'm gonna share with you this table that shows the changes that are recommended. So the first column is going to be your concept alternative. That's pretty straightforward. The current tier is what the where we left it at the end of last meeting. Okay, it's where those were tiered. The tier for discussion column is going to be where an individual or individuals on this committee suggested it go. Okay, so if it's a tier 3, the tier for discussion is either going to be 1 or 2, right? If it's a 2, it's either going to be a 1 or a 3. We also have a column there that's kind of the votes for movement, which is another way of saying how many individuals suggested that those move in the tiers, okay? And then the last column is going to be no response and or acceptance. So that's, we didn't get a response in the homework, or some people can infer acceptance of where it was in the first place, right? So the last 2 columns are going to sum to 12, okay? So in this first one, highlight dam acquisition, it was rated by the city and A2S coming into last meeting as number one tier. Someone suggests, well, maybe that's not as properly, it's not properly tiered. I suggest we move it to tier 2. There, you can tell that there was one person that recommended a movement, and then 11 who were generally are okay with it. Does this table make sense so far? What is going to happen in the background as we go through and talk through each one of these is we're going to, McKenna is going to be updating the slide. It'll be a very similar one. So we're going to try to come to consensus on where each one of these is more properly tiered. And then one of the decisions we're going to make today is to accept these changes, plus the ones that had no comment for changes on them, and use those as a direction to give A2S to move forward into further study, if that makes sense. So before that, we'll obviously have some public comment time, because that's going to be an official act that you guys are doing by recommending these move forward as tiered. And then we'll entertain a motion, and we'll try to get consensus to move, and then that'll be the end of the meeting. Sound good? Yeah.
One question I had, so from my understanding, tier 1 and tier 2 will both receive equal consideration in the next phase of feasibility. Is that correct? Because I think I tiered things with that assumption that it didn't really matter whether it was in tier 1 or tier 2.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
great, thank you.
Now, I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, please.
Lunch is here. Would this be a good time?
This is a great time. Everybody want to get some food? Let's take 5, get our food, and then we'll come back and go through these and have a good discussion about that. right, so we're gonna bring it back in.
Pretty good, I'm gonna swim.
And we're gonna give each other grace if we're talking with our mouths full, when we're making our case for a certain thing or another. Before we got going, Alan flagged me over, and it sounded like from the first few words of his question that we should actually have this question for the whole group. So Alan.
Yeah, so I was just, I mean, it's been a little while since I wrapped my head around this, so I was trying to remember sort of what the definitions were in terms of criteria for tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3, and how that relates to, number one, whether my understanding was originally that some of the ones that are in tier 1 are in tier 1 because they've already kind of started down the road towards working on those. But timing would also be a factor. I mean, is
Your long-term view of the
some of them
50-year
from
view?
tier 1 to tier 2 just because of the time involved, and so I was just looking for a refresher on sort of how, you know, how we define those tiers.
Who wants to go up to bat on that one, on the city team?
I can jump in there. Good question, Alan. So we didn't necessarily have rigid criteria when it came to tiering projects, but it is structured in the sense that they're prioritized from one being the higher priority down to tier 3 being lower priority. You know, as we touched on earlier, tier 1 and tier 2, for the purposes of analysis, would be treated the same. There are a lot of the tier 1 projects that, from the city's perspective, were classified as tier 1 because they are underway. We've done some level analysis and you know, believe that needs to continue. Tier 2 projects, many of them are in tier 2 because of kind of the feasibility or the temporal elements that we see. And then the tier 3 projects are ones that, I think, for various reasons, we do feel that they're fall into the kind of lower priority category. In terms of kind of the estimates for project delivery, how long it might take to actually have these come to fruition, I think that will be something we'll touch on with the analysis and have a better idea when Zach and his team kind of run through that and come back to the group and say, hey, here's what it might take to actually deliver a project like this. So we'll have more of that information for those tier 1 and tier 2 projects that we do go into the analysis phase. So yeah, again, kind of tier 1 and 2 are pretty similar, and we didn't really directly have solid criteria for kind of how that line got around between those two.
Yeah, that helps a lot. I mean, because, you know, in terms of like planting a seed, just thinking about, you know, the acquisition of Highlight Reservoir, it's like moving it from one tier to the other. That was kind of the first thing I thought about. It's like, well, you know, how long is it going to take to do that? I assume that that's a long process
To achieve the goal in that, not move it from tier 1 to tier 2.
Yeah, so, okay.
That's
That helps
fair.
a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll revisit those after we get through it, and so there'll be an opportunity to adjust as needed.
So just so I understand the process, I know you touched on it earlier, but so you guys will go through with the cell tier, start diving into it by tier organization. You guys will present all the findings and then we weigh into the findings, is that right? Or, because it seems like that's where like a lot of the kind of decisions and debate.
The rubber meets the road?
Yeah, it's like, okay, it's gonna cost this much, it's gonna have this environmental impact, it's gonna take this much permitting. Like that's where tiers 1 and 2 are being, I don't care as much on tier 1 and 2, just like as long as everything's getting looked into and you guys know what's in process, what isn't. To me, it's like, okay, let's look at all these options, seem like great options. I don't know fully how much work goes into fleshing all these out, but I don't say a whole boatload for each one of them. So that's where I'm probably less concerned on the tiering and more you guys focus on that, and I'm super excited to see what the results are.
Yeah. Anybody want to address that?
Maybe I'll jump in there, and Jessica or Zach, you can jump in too. In terms of the kind of the tier 3 alternatives that we're proposing to set aside and not move into the analysis phase, part of that is driven by limited resources. We're working in the budget to try to get through this process. And, so I think the more we can set aside now, the more focus we can have on these tier 1 and tier 2 that we feel are more feasible. And so I think that's part of it. And part of it too is just to work through the process and try to work through the screening to set aside what we can to move forward and help simplify the recommendation at the end of the day.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add and confirm that your understanding is correct, that we'll come back kind of with some numbers and, benefit cost analysis, O&M costs, all of that. And then you'll all be able to discuss again, all right? And then we've always talked about tier 3 as the parking lot because we don't want to say after today, we'll never ever be able to look at those again, right? Because it is kind of an iterative process, but as Griffin mentioned, just from a time perspective, cost perspective, we want to, kind of prioritize what we can first, and then if we need to reevaluate, if conversations go there, results go there, we can do that.
Yeah.
So you'll all see all of this again and with numbers so that you can kind of, base your decisions and recommendations on something more than kind of the criteria that we screened at so far.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I could just imagine, once we have all the feedback and data from all you guys, we could spend as much time as we've already spent together just combing through all the intel you guys have gathered, so it's a beast, I know, so.
Yeah. Yeah,
I guess for full disclosure, I would say I was one of those people that did not respond.
Hi, Alan.
Well, it's because of what Jessica and others have said. I mean, I kind of looked at this, I guess I looked at it, let me say I didn't respond because I of acceptance of that.
Excellent.
I mean, it was clear when we met last time that there was going to be lots of opportunity to discuss these and move them around. So I felt like we have a pretty good list of alternatives. And, I just didn't really have any heartburn with any of them, so.
You're a brave man.
That was a
Thank
failure
you.
on my part.
Thank you for being vulnerable there.
Clayton's raising his hand.
Oh, hey, Clayton.
Hi there. I'll pile on with Alan. I did not respond either, but it was partly because I looked through the tiers and felt comfortable with the tiers that we had discussed the last time. So I would put my vote more in the acceptance of what was proposed rather than no response.
Thank you, Clayton. Well, all of that being said, I'll add one additional fastball for you. So does the difference between a tier 1 or a tier 2 have any factor when you guys start evaluating these? Does it, you say, oh, well, this one came out in tier 1, so it automatically has an extra 20 points?
I guess my response at a high level would be, we would maybe have a little more confidence in the numbers for the tier 1 projects. Like we might put in a little more effort on describing exactly what those projects look like. But at this point, really, there's lack of confidence in all of them.
Yeah. Okay. So favoring them doesn't seem to have a whole lot of, they're not going to automatically have extra bonus points necessarily going in. So
You're not a motivating speaker.
because he's thinking about all the mountains of data.
Like, all this was for, yeah, we really don't have a lot of confidence. What have we been doing?
We will, and that's why he's saying it like that, because he understands exactly how much data he's going to have to pull and go through.
I think for me, that's a pretty important distinction because I definitely would have done more thinking around tier 1 versus tier 2 for something. So I did not go to the level. I only was looking at basically move on to feasibility or not. So if it's going to have any way on how things are assessed, I would like another chance to. I brought that question to the group or to the team ahead of time. So I think that's kind of important for me. But what I'm hearing you say, Zach, is it's not significantly going to differ if it's in one or two. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I guess I can take a couple examples here. So like highlight dam raise, that's, you know, they did that in the 90s. And there's been some studies on doing that again. So for that, for the cost of that, we might just like use what's already been done, or then versus like sourdough groundwater storage, NIR, ASR. Well, like, yeah, that's a good example. The city's already putting more resources into looking at that currently with a different consulting. So we would use more detailed information from them. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful.
All right, so I thought we might just go through kind of one by one, and the city and consultant team, I think, get a chance to describe this a little bit and provide some kind of the logic or rationale behind why it was put in the draft tier for the past meeting. And then we can have a discussion from members of the committee about why you think it belongs somewhere different.
Sorry.
No, yeah.
With the discussion we just had in mind, does it make sense for us to spend time actually on these alternatives that are still in the move forward category? Like, what does the group think about? Does that feel important that we spend the time thinking about tier 1 or tier 2?
It might not seem as relevant if we're talking about moving something to tier 1 and from 1 to 2 or 2 to 1, moving something from 2 to 3 or 3 to 1 might be a good use. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Just I'm open to doing either. I just thought I'd raise this question.
So,
Can I ask a clarifying question to your explanation? So it sounds like to the extent that some of the tier 1 projects are being pursued or we've had studies, right, we're going to utilize that information, which will be of greater detail. But if you're comparing an alternative in tier 1 that has never been looked at from the city standpoint to an alternative in tier 2 that has never been looked at, will that level of analysis be the same?
No, it would be slightly more
It would be slightly more.
detailed for tier 1. I think it was the understanding we had. It's going to cost more, right? I mean, we're going to put more effort and more time into looking at those projects. But again, the level of confidence on the results is low.
With that in mind, Zach, since we haven't finalized that that work with you guys just yet, I think the feedback we're hearing is that let's plan on providing the equal level of effort going on for tier 1 and tier 2. So to help simplify the decision-making process here.
Okay. Yeah, so as an example, maybe next time we could show the engineering cost estimate graph, which basically specifies a range of certainty for different classifications of cost estimating. And class 5 is what we're doing here, is like planning level for the least confidence in cost. And typically that is plus, it could be plus or minus 100%. So the level, the cost analysis that we're doing for tier 1 and tier 2 projects, I propose, we can discuss as you're saying, would be class 5 cost estimate. So a very high level look at either tier. If we want to go to class 4, it's like plus or minus 70% accuracy, and that would take us more time and more level of effort. Just to give you an idea of kind of how the process maybe works, or maybe confuse you more.
now compare that to the 2013 IWRP and that plan that set the city on this path. What level of engineering?
Same high, very high
Very
level
high level?
planning level.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
For everything.
Yeah.
So I think what we're maybe agreeing on is that in order to align with kind of the direction and what we've stated in the past, that tier 1 and 2 will be the same in terms of benefit cost analysis. It sounds like we can do that then. to make sure that, to your point, Holly, we don't have to kind of go backward and rethink between 1 and 2, and now we can just move forward knowing that they'll be analyzed at the same level.
I think the distinction is that tier 1 projects are things the cities are priority, or things that they're already doing.
Yeah, so for some of those, we might have a more accurate number, and if we have that, we'll provide it. In terms of analysis, for the ones we don't, it'll be the same level.
Yeah. Same level of confidence.
Alan?
So, I mean, based on what I'm hearing, it seems like we really just need to focus right now on anything that's either gonna move out of tier 3 or into tier 3. But it does raise the question, I guess, of how, is this gonna be confusing to the public down the road when we start talking about tier 1 and tier 2, but then turn around?
I'm never gonna talk to them about that.
Huh?
I will
They're
never
not
talk to
gonna
them
see
about that.
Okay, all right. That answers that.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, it feels to me like this is evolved.
Yeah, let me back up. I mean, I guess part of it is like, it sounds like really there really isn't much difference between tier 1 and tier 2. So I'm trying to,
There won't be now.
right,
But there will be when we make recommendations to the city,
we won't,
commissioners.
It sounds like right
Yep.
here, the distinction is being stripped away in this conversation. That it's gonna be like now 1 and 2.
Here's how I'd simplify things. Exactly. I think it's a binary now. So is it something that we want A2S to study at a plan level? Or is it something that we want to put in the parking lot and say, we'll list this in the IWAP update as something that the city should probably, again, consider looking into the next time it updates the IWAP. But for for this process, we've chosen to say these things, we don't really see that they have a value in moving forward with any level of study, because we want to spend our resources on these things and have a better idea coming out of it of what the value of these other alternatives are. There's finite resources. I think about it like this way. If we're a committee that's designing a submarine, and we're talking about all of the different features that we want on the submarine, I would suggest that a screen door would be a tier 3 amenity, right? It's not worth it. We know it's not going to work.
What song did that come from?
I'm sorry?
What song did that come from?
Was it the Beatles? That was the Yellow Submarine. Help me out, Tim.
I'm trying to remember who it was, but
I thought it was just a joke or something, but that's kind of where I'm looking at this now. So if you guys feel like it's worth A2S studying it, let's argue to keep it. If it's something that you're like, it doesn't make any sense to me, or for a variety of reasons that you all have as you're representing different groups, say, I don't think my neighbors would support this, or, there's an environmental issue I can see with this one that it doesn't make sense moving forward. So let's park it in tier 3. Is that fair?
Can I just add to that,
Yeah.
right, which is that for me, the screen door scenario is hard because I don't ever imagine a scenario where a screen door would work in a submarine, but I think some of the alternatives we're looking at could ultimately work perhaps like in the future or at another time. And so that was part of my coming into this.
They are making incredible screen innovations right now. The AI revolution in screen design.
you haven't seen
No,
the new
well,
one-way screen?
Holly, well said. Well said.
so
You actually lead into one of my questions, just like I was kind of hinting at earlier, was obviously I'm itching for like data and feedback on how these things price out, cost benefit, et
Yes.
cetera. Are you guys using AI at all to flesh out these scenarios? Does that help? Like just to get early feedback?
Well, I haven't used AI to evaluate the alternatives, no. There may be some application for that.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, I'm pretty sure how we look at our development projects, it gives us, we don't use it, that's not what's writing our business plan, but it gives us a very early look of, oh, okay, this is something we're looking into more or not.
Yeah, it's great at like synthesizing and pulling out important. I can see that being applied potentially, yeah. And to clarify on the previous discussion item or whatever, the same discussion item. Looking back at some notes and communication I've had back and forth with Griffin on the next step, it looks like we actually are going to put in the same level of effort for tier 1 and tier 2 projects. There is no distinction.
All right, so it's a yay, nay, thumbs up, thumbs down. Tim?
Just clarification, you were talking about the level of confidence in the numbers that you're going to give the city, more level of confidence that you have, the more it's going to cost the city, so there's some sort of a balance there as to how much time. But then, I guess in support of tier 1 or tier 2, it seems as though maybe not at this step, but maybe at the next step down the road, you may want to go ahead and put a higher level of confidence in the tier 1 alternatives, so that, I mean, I think I would want that from my engineer to go ahead and say, okay, give us some better numbers so that we can kind of focus now your manpower of the city into those. Is that kind of where this is going to go? Not right now, but at another step?
Maybe before you answer that, I guess my question is, so if we can get through this process and deal with moving anything from tier 3 in and out, then ultimately for the remaining ones, we do the analysis, and then would those be ranked in some way? I mean, when it gets time to present it to the public, are we going to show which ones of those do float to the top and which ones are down lower?
There has to be some sort of blended metric by which these are scored. I'm not exactly sure how that looks for this particular project, but we have to share what we found, why we think it should be a priority to put in a IWRP update, or why it's something that is lower on the spectrum there. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, or if we're going to, but to Tim's point earlier, all the more reason to share with you guys. Here's the boards from the open house. Are these going to make sense to people? I'd also point out that our crystal ball here is a 50-yard target. So things that don't make sense right now, either politically or socially or for a variety of reasons, we don't know what happens in 40 years or 50 years. So that's another argument for kind of keeping things in the mix, even though they don't look really great right now. And then also remember, this is something that, just like we're doing now, the city's going to have to update this water resource plan as things go, as data becomes updated and things change and we have a different understanding. So, this is a snapshot in time, and we're just going to have to do our best to say, here's the general path we recommend the city go down to make sure that we have enough water for the future. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I think.
Yeah, I can respond to the question Tim directly. In short, at this time, we wouldn't be continuing to analyze the tier 1 options within this process. But I think each individual project will have a next logical step they move forward. And as we progress with that, we would be moving into that next level of analysis when we progress through a project.
That third screen, like right now we're in the middle screen, that last screen is the last part of analysis, or the last.
Yeah, depending on what's the next step that the city needs to take to move forward an alternative and set into our capital plan to figure out what that looks like. Some of these will be more straightforward than others. Some of them will need that additional study work to provide clarity. So it'll be dependent, but right now within this IWRP update, we're not planning to do another round of analysis on tier 1 projects that this group selects at the time.
Alan, maybe just to add on to what you had said, there will be some consideration, of course, for how long projects take, right, from feasibility analysis to getting water, right? And so we haven't really decided how that will look in the plan, but to your point about prioritizing and and there inherently being a timing element with that, that will be part of the conversation down the road as well. And will inevitably, right, sort of guide implementation decisions out of the.
That's also part of the economic criteria, those timelines. Yeah.
So I think the key is just, you know, when we get to the end where you're presenting to the public, to make sure they recognize that these things that we have in that tier 3 category now as alternatives, we're not saying, you know, throw them in the trash can necessarily, just because I'm sure that will come up. People are saying, well, wait a minute, why don't you want to reuse wastewater for some good purpose, you know, perfectly, but
Yeah.
we've already talked about it and know that right now it's not very practical, but there's just not a demand for it. Like Green District, for example, so.
Let the next group in 12 years from now go ahead and rehash that.
Yeah. I think everything's back on the table when it's updated. So. All right.
I think we should dig in.
I agree. So,
I think the dam acquisition would be the only one that, given Holly's initial suggestion and Alan's, that if we only focus on the ones that are moving in or out of tier 3, I think this is the only one that doesn't do that.
we cool? With status quo?
Status quo, meaning leave it at tier 1.
Move it into tier 2 and then 1.5, because it's the same thing, effectively.
All right. That,
That's my,
Either or. Yeah.
I don't know, it's 11 to 1, I'd leave it at 1.
let's fight about it.
I'm
One
here.
and a half. I think we just kind of agree that it's not going to matter too much, but somebody took the time to comment on it, I guess we did recognize that.
I just wanted to say, so Becca with Aggie couldn't be here, but she sent me notes. I'm also gonna like speak on her behalf. So maybe she wouldn't comment on this after the discussion, but since she's not here, she did make a note about this one and recognized or acknowledged its ranking in that screening criteria that we did last time. And then said, noting that it ranked fairly low, but that Aggie is interested in what the analysis shows for justification. So supporting 1 or 2 in that way.
All right. So, what do you think? We should keep it in 1 or move it to 2?
1.
Okay.
I'm going to recommend 1 just because I think it's a good idea. But I think it's one that's definitely feasible, at least. It doesn't have some of the issues, but
Okay.
I recommend stay 1.
Clayton,
I think that my point, I'm just reiterating to leave it at 1. That's where I would support it being at 1.
all right. I think we have general head nods, so we can move along. Oh, here's a 2 to 3. So this was the discussion of the Canyon Ferry idea. So we're building a big straw, right? From Canyon Ferry to Bozeman. Does staff and AE2S want to put a finer point on what this looks like conceptually?
Sure, I can start. So this was included in the 2013 IWRP. It was probably conceived well before that. Maybe you know some history on it, Sean, but it's the most expensive, but it's also the most reliable and the highest yield by far. In the 2013 IWRP, it assumed 20,000 acre-feet of annual supply. I think I've mentioned to you all before in previous meetings that there's 300,000 acre-feet available through the Bureau of Rec on the reservoir. So certainly, which was originally set up for municipal use. The fact that Bozeman is upstream and uphill and far-ish obviously is challenging. I will say that based on our 3% growth rate that we decided on, like a year ago, but actually probably was about a year ago. The future need, the 50-year need for water supply will be anywhere, well, 2.5% to 3.5% will be anywhere from 15,000 acre feet to 35,000 acre feet additional beyond what the city already has.
15,000 to 35,000?
So Canyon Ferry represents a one fell swoop, right? Potential there, and I think that's something that carries weight, regardless of how controversial it is. And I'm not saying it moves forward at all. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's something that should be considered, in my opinion, in this integrated water resource plan.
Zach, could you speak to how much analysis it would require because we've already done a feasibility study on this? It's a pretty low lift for you guys.
So very much a lower lift than the other alternatives because it has been studied several different times, and interestingly enough, the cost has been about the same regardless of the capacity, between $15,000 to $20,000 per acre foot. That actually is a big range, but again, with the uncertainty, lack of confidence. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, just, as the group is thinking about which ones to move forward, the fact that, we're working within a budget, I guess I just want to get a sense of, we've done some analysis here, so I'm wondering if it might be worth, because we've done analysis, we don't have to expend much of our resource on it, if it would, if that would be a consideration, I guess.
Yes.
For the group to.
Yes, agreed. I think the effort on our end to establish a cost and a supply and how that relates to this study is well.
So that's the rationale for having it where it was. Let's talk about reasons why we might kick it to tier 3.
So I'm here representing the neighborhood council, and this might be a great idea, but wow, is it unpopular for a number of reasons. The expensive part really puts people off. So I like tier 3 because it's in the parking lot, as I understand it. It's still available to, as an option if things went in a certain direction, we absolutely needed water there. But I don't think it belongs in 2 right now.
Can you describe a little bit deeper the feeling that people who are just on its face opposed to this, their reasons why, for somebody like me who's from out of town?
The expense is a big part. So obviously, if the city of Bozeman is spending a ton of money on this, they can't spend that money on something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is just a huge project. It's 90 miles away. Canyon Ferry occasionally goes dry. I remember at one drive, you could see the Christmas trees that they drop in the bottom of the reservoir. And I think people have an idea that we have a reservoir. Can we use that reservoir? So that it isn't that it's a bad source of water, but it's more like, well, why are we going in that direction? That seems like a direction that costs a lot of money, and we have things available right now. Not saying that's absolutely right, but I'm saying that is the perception.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Do you think they would be open, like if it was in tier 1 or 2 and you got more information, they would be able to hearing the information and how it like stacks up, or it's just like a perception that's not changing?
Oh, I wish.
Because like if you came in and the cost wasn't as expensive, would people then be able to say like, oh, I thought it was really expensive, but this is actually in the top 5 most practical.
If it were in the top 5 most practical, I'd be astonished by that. Wouldn't everybody else? But it could be. I mean, if the state were to step in or something, but,
Does it also feel like, I mean, I'm just coming from a general direction, not a specialist thing of anything on the neighborhood. Anyway, feels like you're taking from your neighbor.
yeah.
Taking from your neighbor?
Taking from your neighbor, like, we're gonna go get water over by Helena and bring it here. That feels like I'm taking from my neighbor.
I'll just say,
Yeah.
when I presented to the sustainability board, this came out as one of the ones they were most against for that reason,
Yeah.
and then for environmental reasons, they just didn't like taking water from another watershed. If there were other options on the table, which there are. So they were very against it.
And I'm not against it necessarily, I just wanted to put that out as a perception.
That's why we're here. Yeah.
Another way to look at it though is, I mean, it isn't the same watershed, but it's water that's already moved through the Gallatin. And that's, that's where I've always been kind of hung up on it. As a hydrologist, I still, believe that there's a phenomenal amount of water that moves through the Gallatin Valley. And so the example would be, these, I could dig these numbers up, but I mean, if you look at the total input through the basin, it's in the range of 700,000 acre feet a year of water moving through the Gallatin. So letting that water move through, and then I believe this alternative would also require a treatment plant at the intake, would it?
To develop a water treatment and delivery system.
So you also have to build a treatment plant all the way down somewhere between Helena and town and pipe it back. It just seems like a really crazy idea if we have a lot of water available to figure out other ways to manage it. It's the only reason I've never really liked it. So it's another perspective on the same kind of idea. But
I'm no expert on it. It would seem strange to me that you treat it at the source and then pumped potable water 90 miles. It seems to me that you would pump raw water that distance.
you could have a lot of biofouling issues. I mean, you'd certainly have to do at least some sedimentation and stuff.
Yeah.
But
I don't know what I'm talking about, but
yeah.
There's examples of both systems, regional systems like that.
okay. Hey, Clayton?
Yes, I don't know if now's the right time or if you're just looking for people who support moving it to tier 3.
We're just having a free flowing conversation.
Okay. I would vote no to move it to tier 3. Primarily, I think a couple points that have been raised. I think that there are a lot of pieces of information that I think would help inform the discussion. I certainly acknowledge the political claims that are associated with this, and I am always a proponent of getting more information on the table. Keeping it in tier 2 does that. As to sort of my role in representing conservation and increased flow, I think Alan's correct. There's a lot of water that moves through the Gallatin, but the Gallatin River is more than 6 times over appropriated from a legal demand side. We have a tremendous asset of municipal focused water sitting within relatively short distance. It would be, I think, irresponsible to take it out of consideration and not develop more information. I understand the political downsides of this, and certainly I've heard many folks concerned about it. That's fair, but it is by far the most reachable municipal water source that we can squeeze water out of a sponge everywhere else or have one big source. I would like to have that alternative explored further, brought more information to the table. And if folks say politically this isn't something we want to touch, I think that's fair, but let's have an informed conversation. So I would not support moving it to tier 3.
Thank you, Clayton. You're cutting out a little bit there, but I think we got the gist.
I remember us talking about as a TAC, like, the only reason I felt even comfortable at that point with this, like, remaining in consideration for further analysis was because we had talked about the possibility of, instead of like a big straw, capturing the water before it even gets there. And so that's, I didn't touch this to move one way or the other, and after talking to some folks at DNRC, we thought, like, if the city wants to continue pursuing this, if the WAC wants to, like, we, you know, our opinions are never here nor there, but that was something that I was curious about seeing, like, how that analysis would shake out. The straw, a pipeline, a set of pumps, like, that's something that is so gargantuan in scale. So I think that's a huge turnoff, understandably, I think, to a lot of people, just like logically, but capturing first before it goes down was something I was curious about, at least analyzing. So if that's a part of if like that's a method of using or potentially capturing or obtaining canyon ferry water, then I think that could be worthy of assessing further.
Would that be part of the analysis, is the catch first?
So there
It's
have,
all under Mara, wouldn't it?
there have been studies that looked at potential intake at Tostin area. And as you know, as you move upstream, it becomes more legally complex than impossible. I think the Tostin takeout was found to be feasible. I need to review that study to know exactly what that entailed. So that, and in the IWRP, the 2013 IWRP, no, that wasn't. So that is something to discuss, I suppose, as like a separate alternative.
Holly?
Sorry, I just beat you there. I'll go first.
Ladies first.
Okay, I evaluated this alternative as a pipeline. So it sounds like that's what this alternative is capturing. Okay. And on behalf of the Gallatin Watershed Council, had recommended moving it into Tier 3. I think that for us, recognizing that we are assessing these alternatives across multiple criteria, and with that criteria being weighted, environmental and social criteria were weighted the highest, both from our groups as well as from the community and the community survey. And so I see in that weighting that it's weighted pretty low on that list, except for water supply. Recognizing that a goal of the plan is water supply, of course, but wondering where we can consider considering within the context of all of the alternatives, ones that have fewer regrets and that are less difficult to reverse first, and consider higher risk, more expensive alternatives at a later time. Is there any risk to advancing a big project too early with large infrastructure and high cost? I think there's also the ecological repercussions that perhaps we're unclear about, but there have been examples of interbasin transfers in other places where I think those ecological consequences have been primarily negative. I think there's also the social and equity piece. So are there people in this room, even if they're outside of our community, who would be impacted by this that we should be considering? And I think the social acceptance piece is actually very important and one of our criteria that we should consider. Yeah.
I guess after, what I've heard, the only reason I'm kind of leaning towards not moving it to 3 is just based on what we heard. We've effectively already done the Tier 2 level analysis on it, for the most part, right? And that's really the only difference in the criteria between 1, 2, and 3. Is just kind of struggling as to whether, how much it really matters in the long run. Thinking that probably down the road, when you get to actually proposing alternatives, that it's going to come out for other reasons. Political perception, political concerns, public knowledge.
Thank you.
So that's the only thing to think about.
I meant to mention that too. There's already been a significant amount of feasibility study on this project. And so what additional feasibility would we consider by keeping it in tier 1 and tier 2?
Well, I don't know if we gain anymore. Basically, I guess what I'm saying is it already kind of meets the criteria of what we would do for tier 2. So it doesn't sound like that. You basically have to refresh the review of what you did. So if that's the case, it does meet that criteria. I mean, on a personal level, I would rank it as a 3, but I'm just struggling because of that fact that you basically kind of already done the review of it. So that would be the only argument I would have for keeping it tier 2.
I do think aside from just like what I mentioned too, capturing it, if that isn't part of it, like assuming that if it is like an infrastructural transfer of water rather than a capturing first, I would put it in tier 3. Like that's, I'm right there too.
Could I chime in on behalf of Rebecca?
Yeah.
Again, this one was on her list.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so, and I'll also mention, so it looks like in her kind of evaluation of some of these, she was thinking about if it met different strong and weak takeaways. So I want to explain what those are. So her strong takeaways were prioritizing optimization and resiliency, minimizing environmental impact, enhancing ecosystem services, and providing city flexibility. Things were lower if it had a low return on investment, low public support, and or complex permitting. And so Becca's notes acknowledge that this alternative was ranked in the bottom third of the alternatives list. It was evaluated for the 2013 Integrated Water Resource Plan, acknowledging that analysis has been done before and that further analysis may be redundant, complex, costly, and that public support, she noted, has not improved. It only meets one of the strong takeaways I listed, but 2 of the weak ones. So that was sort of her explanation for, her voice and representing Aggie on this one.
You have a comment?
Yeah, I'm not advocating at all for this, to implementing this option. I like continuing to study it. It's more of, this is the big boogeyman in the corner that we know is a resource that's there. I think the more we understand this big boogeyman, it's probably beneficial. Just to know, if we're not able to figure out these other methods, this is what we're faced with. And then we know what that backup option is. So I like continuing to study it just for understanding. It kind of helps motivate us to figure out other options before we have to venture off this direction.
More information? Tim?
Before I joined TAC, and this was presented kind of more in a political framework, it was kind of a shock value. And I certainly understand from the neighborhoods as to why would we ever do something to that proportion. But the amount of time that we've spent with all these alternatives, and a lot of the ones that we've already tossed out, like we're not going to the Yellowstone, we can't go to the Gallatin. You've done studies to look at what sort of groundwater is available. It's come to my realization that on the long run, we have a limited water supply to utilize, and we're trying to, squeeze rocks to get water in some places, it seems like. And a lot of the alternatives that we're looking at, and again, this goes back to what is the actual amount of acre feet that we might be able to get out of any of these alternatives. In some of them, it's just a drop in the bucket. They need to be done for a conservation standpoint and utilize everything that we have. But, I mean, our total goal here is to be looking at not only 10, 20, but 50-year plan. And I think that it's important to keep it in tier 2. There's another reason, as we were all saying, about what is the public perception? Well, we're trying to go ahead and educate the public because we've been educated. I don't think that I think that if we are true to the public, we submit this, and not with like, this is something that we're gonna do in 10 years and all of our worries are gone sort of scenario. But to me, when I ended up learning that there was, what was it, 300,000 gallons has been allocated out of the, Canyon Ferry.
Acre feet.
Or, excuse me, acre feet. That was astounding to me, because that to me was, put it in the framework of how forward thinking those people were at that time to recognize that we're in a closed basin, and that if at some point the inevitable were to happen, and we're in that process of seeing Bozeman grow to levels of, hello, we have now a direct flight from Atlanta to add into everything else, we're going to see continued growth. I think that if we put it in tier 2, continue the research that's been done, the study of it, and to maybe continue to refine the numbers as is necessary, our obligation is also to teach and inform the public in a way in which this doesn't just get thrown on. I think that they're going to come in and they're going to look at that and say, no, but if we then kind of counter that with information, yeah, no, not now, but hey, if we continue to see this astronomical growth happen, and this is not going to be in my lifetime, but I think it's our responsibility to keep it in tier 2, to look at it. And I'm sorry, but this was a scary winter, and recognizing that the water that we do have available out of Highlight Dam, out of Sourdough, I mean, is Lyman Creek going to continue to be supporting us in that way? We can only hope, but if we continue to see winters like this, fortunately we've had a spring that's been kind of kicking back in and building our snowpack again, but if we continue to see winters and extended periods of drought, we're going to be in trouble. And that's a scary, scary thing. Yeah, we see a lot of our water flowing out of this valley, but it's actually flowing into the Missouri and into Canyon Ferry. So it's like we've been filling Canyon Ferry from our watershed. So it is our water. It's just going to be a little bit harder to get to. So that's why I would continue to just keep it in tier 2 and recognize, keep it there, be knowledgeable about it, increase our knowledge, and then educate our fellow Bozemanites. So
the other alternative would be, I mean, because really, when you're talking about us having a limited amount of water, we have a limited amount of legally available water. I'm arguing that there's a lot more physically available water. So since we are letting this water, we'd let it flow through here, get to Canyon Ferry, and then we would treat it and pump it back. And so maybe what we ought to do is look at this alternative, maybe already have a little bit differently, and include in evaluating it the possibility for addressing it through some sort of water law change, so that we can figure out a way to capture that water before it gets to Canyon Ferry and use it under that reserve right. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but I mean, because really that's all that's happening. We're letting it flow through and then we're going to pump it back. But that reserved right, and that's a municipal reserved right, isn't it? So it's only for municipal use. So it's 300 acre feet of water. There's a reason they're sitting there, because nobody's really that interested in using it right now. But.
Some of it does go to the Boston Valley Irrigation District.
I was going to ask that too. Who else is also going to be looking at Canyon Ferry as a resource around the state as well?
It's about 100,000 that's already allocated and 300,000 that's available. So some of it goes to Helena Valley Irrigation District. 83,000 acre feet roughly.
So it's not just municipal water, right?
7,500 just about goes to the Toston Valley Irrigation District upstream of the reservoir at Toston, and then about 11,000 acre feet goes to the city of Helena.
So that's kind of what I'm getting. So was that in the original law, or did they make a change to allow the irrigation district to take it up before Canyon Ferry? That's kind of what I was getting at, is maybe including in an update of that alternative, looking at the feasibility of doing something like that, where we could take that water, but not wait till it gets all the way to Canyon Ferry to take it. So the Toston Irrigation District must have figured out a way to do that somehow, or it was in the original.
They've gotten shares. I mean, it's what that, like, there's these agreements with BOR, with like the actual, like, it's not laid out, it's not codified. Like, those amounts, as far as I know, are laid out, they're not codified, but, yeah, I know, I'm like thinking about it because the Gallatin isn't the only river system that feeds into it. You've also got the Jefferson and Madison.
I'll just say that if we're thinking about, I mean, the way I'm thinking about this is it's a last ditch effort, like if we really need water, then that's great. But what about like, I mean, so if we're thinking of that big of a price tag, like what about water reclamation effluent, a new utility? Like that's a big price tag, but I mean, that isn't going to be as politically and culturally and socially and ecologically, as far as I know, impactful. So, I don't know, I would just say that I'd rather explore that before, like, saying we're thinking about this other way. So, I mean, hearing everything you're talking about, I would much more support the, like, exchange and the idea of capturing it before getting into the reservoir.
I know Clayton has his hand up. Clayton?
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in. I hope that I'm not cutting out quite as bad now. I just wanted to speak to Alan's point. I would dispute a bit. I don't dispute the fact that there's physically available water in the Gallatin Valley, but I do not agree that there's legally available water in the Gallatin Valley. And so while there may be plenty of water flowing through the Gallatin, it's 6 times over appropriated. That's why I think this large source of water with a municipal purpose is incredibly important to keep in the mix.
Thank you. You were much clearer there. I want to return back to the to something I heard earlier about the perception that we're stealing and taking something from our neighbor. Can we talk a little bit about that? Is the perception that if we pull it out there that somebody else is not going to be getting it?
I think it looks a little like Bozeman, the big rich town, is able to do this. Other towns don't have the opportunity to do it. They're not even studying water.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think if this is presented as an alternative as equal to the Lyman utilization, this is all we're going to talk about. We're just going to be talking about it. Yeah, it's just going to take all the attention away. My understanding of Tier 3 was that it's a parking lot. I didn't think of it as taking it completely off the table, but not being pursued at this time. And since we have, the research from 2013, and I'm also, thank you for bringing it up, Holly, how low it scored from this group. It scored lower than the Missouri River Canyon Ferry, the Highlight Dam acquisition. But that is something that's part of this community now that we could fix, but going into another community and kind of barging in and grabbing up a bunch, I don't think that's going to be acceptable. But
So the argument or the statement about, we're putting it in the parking lot, it's just not under consideration this time. from one way of looking at it, could be an argument to keep it as a tier 2 because we are not actively pursuing it, but we're also not saying it's totally worthless and not worth the time to look at it. Devil's advocate, but.
Okay.
Yeah, Holly?
Let me try to have my thoughts clear. Sorry, when you said that, I sort of like went into a different realm in my brain.
I'm sorry. He's a madman.
I think, let's see. I might have to come back to me, sorry, I'm listening thread.
I'll come back to you. So,
Well, the reality, we're not stealing water because it's already been allocated to us. And I think that's, again, a misperception of what the public is thinking. And that's what changed me when I became aware of like, this was allocated a long time ago. And I think, again, we have to inform our neighbors that we're very different than the other towns. We're at the upper end of our basin. And, you know, Missoula doesn't have to worry about water because they have so much water flowing through. They care less about are their piping systems efficient, how much are they losing, and so on and so forth. We have a very unique situation and it's very tenuous. You know, you talk to people in Missoula, it's like, oh, well, the water levels are down and they're not able to go ahead and river serve Brennan's Wave. You know, that sort of comment, but they're not worried about whether they have drinking water or irrigation water. We have to worry about, do we have enough drinking water, period, to just handle our basic needs. And our sources are very limited.
I will remind just right there though that not super far at the scale that we're talking about downstream of Canyon Ferry is Fairfield, Augusta. Like these, I mean, talk about really struggling with access to water.
Yeah.
Like, so the neighbors in our basin that may have something to say would be further downstream. So, yeah.
It's totally appropriate. And that's terrible what's happening, like in Fairfield.
Yeah.
I'll just say that if it's included in tier 2, it stays in tier 2, then I would just advocate that some research investigate some of these other options that have been brought up by the TAC, like the, maybe not just the pipeline, but what are some other ways, like I would be supportive of that if that research were to be done. I also think if it's considered in a suite of options, including a lot of resiliency projects and things like that, it might be more palatable.
I know we need to move on past this one, but
we need to find consensus, and we're going to be here as long as it takes.
so related to that though,
Might be here a while.
what we also discussed earlier is that, you know, when we're all done, that these tiers are going to go away. And so really the tier 2, tier 3 thing has significance to us right now, but if it's not going to be something that the public's going to see, they're just going to see the list of alternatives and how they shake out. And I guess, you know, based on everything I've heard, I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other, but I'm wondering how much it really matters.
Well, it's a cost, right? Like if the money is going to be spent actually analyzing it to this degree versus not.
But he's already said that in this one that that's a very minor cost because it's kind of already been done, so.
Yeah.
So either way.
If we look at those other concepts, utilizing Canyon Ferry water, like pulling from a different, or exchanging for water, those would be some alternatives we might spend a little more time exploring.
Yeah.
They have been explored before, but I haven't read that study in a long time, so I can't remember where we're at. Julie Merritt, also on the consulting team, is the water rights person working on this, and she specifically looked into like taking out from Tosta and taking out upstream of that, and should have that knowledge.
Yep.
So it could be included in this.
Yep.
I just wanted to point out, real quick, the good news is that this is by far the most controversial one on our list. If you look at the scores here, and we can tell by the voices in the room that this is the passionate one here. So, Tim and then Holly, coming back to you.
Clarification on what we were going to present to the public then. Are we, and this goes back to tier 1, tier 2, and then tier 3, are we going to be showing the public what are in the tier 3 categories? And I'm trying to understand also, we spent so much time trying to understand all of these. And we're trying to now go keep in what tier 1, tier 2. It's going to be overwhelming for the public to be able to look at the entire list of, well, we had 42 alternatives. It seems to me that for simplicity and a little bit more simplicity and clarification to just present to the public tier 1 and tier 2. So is that where we're going?
If I might make a suggestion, I would really appreciate this group focusing on what we're asking AE2S to study.
Okay.
And we'll cross the bridge of what,
Okay.
exactly how and what and when and all of that stuff later. Your focus right now is to help us allocate the finite resources of research and study for the ones that have some merit to them. We will certainly be talking about that at a later date, but I would love for you guys to not be worried about how we're going to present this, because we need to get to that first point first.
I vote for tier 2.
Okay, so it's Holly.
I'm gonna counterbalance it and vote for tier 3, just based on what you just said.
Okay.
Because in that case, then we don't have to worry about those guys wanted to spend time on it. It's pretty clear that there's a lot of questions and a lot of concern with it, and it's probably not going to shake out on the public side very well in the long run.
Holly?
Sorry.
Thank you.
That's why we do this.
Again, just bringing my perspective, which I think is inherent to my role, coming from the watershed perspective, so not wanting to disagree with anyone directly, but I think many of these alternatives bring co-benefits of resiliency, and when we're talking about Tim, right, like worrying about drought and needing to prepare for drought, I think from a watershed perspective, implementing alternatives that will bolster the resiliency of our local watershed would be the #1 thing that we would look and propose doing, recognizing that Canyon Ferry was mentioned as a one full swoop opportunity for supply. I think that we need to be considering multiple ways that we are contributing to our water supply. And I think from my understanding, Jessica, you probably know this better, but we have a couple of ways of managing our water consumption, which is conservation, and then managing demand. And I think there's, right, within the context of the IWRP, our goal here together is to identify water for this municipality and this city for the next 50 years. But I think coming from the watershed perspective, and I'm not sure if there's any other chance to bring it up, but when we have to think about actually growing within the means that we have with our local resources here. And so I don't know what our consensus process is, but I'm not wanting to disrupt that, but would need to keep it in tier 3
Okay.
for me.
So definitionally, when we were meeting as TAC and PAC, we talked about the definition of consensus, right? It's not that everybody is fully enthusiastic about a decision that's made, but it's saying, I don't like it, but I can live with it, right? So that's what we committed to on saying what consensus is, because we know that all the variety of voices in the room, we're all going to see things from a different perspective, right? So I guess my question is, on this particular conceptual alternative, where do we go from here?
I see this being like this process, the way that I described it to my team was that us deciding that something is in any of these tiers is neither an endorsement nor like a condemnation of anything. I mean, these are concepts, not projects yet. So even here, just saying if we keep it in tier 2, that doesn't mean we're endorsing it. maybe it means that after it's built out and we see that greater analysis, we can all agree, like, yeah, actually, after seeing these numbers, that it's not worth pursuing, we're not gonna put our energy there after all. Or yeah, like maybe nothing else is really shaking out like this as it turns out. And if we all come to that conclusion, that'd be pretty special. That'd be pretty amazing. Who knows? But I think like the reason now thinking that like if something is explored about taking it out here, closer to here than further downstream, and knowing that this isn't us saying like right now we're on board with it, like this is us saying, we can't say with certainty that we are or are not on board yet. We don't know, like getting the numbers and then maybe the community can, like we can speak to that more clearly. So with that, I'm okay with it being in either. Like I'm comfortable with it in tier 2, knowing that that's not the same thing as an endorsement of this alternative. And I'm also okay, like if it's tier 3, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Sorry, one question for A2S. I know we're trying to prioritize your guys' efforts here. If I look at this like a project, this is actually probably one of the simpler ones to quantify, I would guess, where I know it's a giant number, but am I right or wrong in that? Like it's kind of a known.
It's fairly clear cut, and because the source is fairly reliable and consistent, and
You know how
where
much
it is.
pipe cost to dig, and so it wouldn't drain you guys. This isn't gonna suck up a bunch of time from you guys to.
No, so I think that a lot of that costing has already been done. It would need to be refreshed and looked at again. I don't think that would take a lot of time. And then there's kind of the alternatives to this alternative, whether it be withdrawing upstream of Canyon Ferry or some water rights exchange with Canyon Ferry. That has also been looked at, but would need a refresh. So to answer your question, yeah, it would be a huge effort.
Does that include, right, I thought I heard Brooke saying if we can continue considering that it include the environmental and social pieces, and so does that align still exactly the thoughts on additional feasibility? Do we have the environmental and social aspects of that project pretty clear also?
I don't know. I don't think, I think we have like permitting, right, considered, but all of the other things that aren't regulatory, we haven't quantified.
I would say also that is a key input of what is politically possible, what is socially possible in the community, which is the exact kind of feedback that we're going to be looking for at the open houses. For people to come in and say, I don't care how much it costs, it's a fire hose and we need it. Or I don't care how much it costs, it's too much and I don't want to feel like I'm taking from my neighbor, right? So that's input that we will be getting. And then I don't know exactly how the teammate that you have, that's Julie, who's her goal is to look at it through that lens of socially and through the neighborhoods.
Sarah, sorry.
Sarah?
Church.
Sarah, sorry.
She was here last time, yeah.
Yeah, she couldn't make it today.
I thought you were talking about water rights, yeah.
So, that's so where do we go from here?
You're gonna take some public comment? Well, you mentioned public comment before.
We can take public comment at the end when we're gonna entertain a motion. And yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I guess one way to look at it is that basically 1/3 of the group were in favor of moving it. I'm interpreting your chart right.
And you've defected.
But
You have to tell them.
if we need to find consensus, and I think it seems like we need to move on or whatever, and get through our list here. I would be okay with leaving, I would be okay either way, but I mean, we could leave it at tier 2. I don't know how, how do we get past this? We just take a vote? Yeah, it's kind of.
I think if we take a vote, we have to have like a motion and then public comment and that sort of thing, which I'm fine. We
Just on
can.
this one.
Mhm.
Should we move on to the others and revisit this one? Or should we, is that dangerous?
I don't want to come back to it. Just a point of clarification, while I have been pushing forward to stay in tier 2, I want to make sure that it's clear that when we get to the final ranking, I anticipate that this will be at the very lowest bottom of what we tell the city to move forward with now. My push to just get it into tier 2 is just so that we can have refreshed numbers to just be able to kind of know where it is with everything else. And while I don't love this idea by any means, it does represent something that could, in the 50 years. But I see that the end result is get the numbers and then just we'll score it down low, because I think that's typically what the general consensus is here. We don't like it, we don't love it. But right now, again, this is not going, what we're talking about going to the public, we're talking about what's going for their work, and that's why I support it. So. Do you agree?
Why consensus?
Among two.
I'll move, we take a vote.
Well,
Of the members
I'll
on.
Second, all in favor? Wait, all in favor of taking a vote?
Aye.
All opposed to voting?
Clayton has his hand up.
Clayton,
I'm just trying to understand what we're voting on. There was a lot of people.
No, that we're voting.
so we're gonna, sounds like we have a motion on the table here to take a vote on whether I-1 is in tier 2 or 3. We're going, if that passes, we're going to invite public comment. And then after public comment, we're going to vote on whether it belongs in tier 2 or 3.
Okay, my suggestion from a parliamentary procedure standpoint is that the motion to have a vote or not is not really necessary. And prior to public comment, I would have a proposed motion of what you're planning on doing to either have it in tier 2 or tier 3. So there's a decision to be made.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
So who wants to make that motion?
I have a motion that we vote to proceed to.
No, your motion is,
I motion that it stays in tier 2.
okay. Everybody clear on the,
I would second the motion.
okay, thank you, Clayton. We'll invite public comment. Dan, come on up.
Can I do it from here?
Sure.
Okay, so I would argue for moving the Canyon Ferry pipeline from tier 2 to tier 3 for all of the philosophical, social, cultural, economic, and environmental arguments made by those who are also in favor of moving it from 2 to 3. I would like to add that a few city commissions ago, when then consultants proposed the pipeline, they were looking at a population of 400,000 plus between Bozeman, Four Corners, and Belgrade. I think that argues for a situation that not many of us would be in favor of. I also think keeping it in tier 2 would induce development, induce developers that are now involved in Bozeman with a lot of out-of-state money coming in and creating, in a way, another land rush. So also the scientific literature indicates that the cons very much outweigh any pros for large intra-basin or inter-basin transfers of water.
And not seeing any other public comment. So all in favor of keeping I-1 in the current tier 2, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
4. 5-4.
Okay.
All right, this, it passes. So I guess we move on to the next item.
Wait,
Yep.
what, it passed?
I know,
I don't think it passed.
Maybe we should raise our hands.
Are we 4-4 right now?
No, 5-4.
5-4, okay.
Did you vote?
No, but I feel like, oh,
The cheater's on you.
I'll vote to keep it in 2. I feel like-
6-4.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll turn the page. More to come on that one. Let's talk about watershed restoration to improve yield. City team, Zach, do you want to just brief us on the concept here?
No, I don't, actually. I think we can. For Holly's, yeah, I think we can move through these quickly.
2-1, so kind of moot. 3-2.
3-2, down here. So Griffin and I were just chatting about this one before the meeting. And the city does want this to be tier 2, so there you go.
Well, that's easy.
No, because there's only a few people that wanted to.
Well, I'll just say,
Yeah.
I mean, when I thought more about it, because I did have another one that related to this, but, I mean, would the same non-potable non-potable utility feed all of these other non-potable services? Or like, sort of about irrigation in city limits and outside of city limits and for new development, blah, 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 like all this stuff. Would the same utility support those functions?
This is specifically for a city utility, so
Okay.
city, residential, commercial, city use,
Okay.
using non-potable water for irrigation.
Yeah, I would support it. I didn't vote on that one usually.
And my notes from the last meeting said it just was very expensive to implement. That was the reason that it was sort of, or one of the reasons.
Discussion with Ken and Ferry is maybe very
Good, that's what we're here.
If they're both expensive, why not explore this one too?
That's where
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
So does anybody have an argument for keeping it in tier 3? Clayton? Sorry.
No argument to keep it in tier 3. I would be supportive of moving into tier 2.
Holly?
Likewise, I was just letting you know Clayton.
Okay, I think, feels like we have consensus. We're gonna do that at the very end with the long list of them,
Oh, okay. We only did the motion on,
because it was so contentious, yeah.
okay.
Ditch improvements.
The reason this was in tier 3 was, there are a lot of benefits to our ditch system as it is currently laid out in the valley, providing recharging groundwater and providing reliable groundwater for both ag and habitat. So this was kind of seen as a non-starter from a political / environmental / social perspective.
Might add one more point there on the city side. I think we saw this one as being a challenging project to implement with city funds at this kind of early stage of inception.
Because this is not, the improvements are not going to be made on city land, right?
Well, yeah, and city funds, city ratepayer funds have to be used towards projects that have a direct benefit to the ratepayer. This was one of those ones that was kind of hard to see how that argument gets made at this point. Fair. Not to say that it couldn't get there, but that was kind of our perception initially.
Is the city listed as a co-owner on any ditches?
Farmers Canal, I believe.
Farmers Canal.
We do own Farmers Canal ships.
Okay.
We may have more, I'm just speed on that.
Okay.
I pushed that it stays in tier 3 primarily for the fact that it's the recharge for groundwater. and the difficulty of utilizing city money for this type of project.
Holly and then Clayton.
I had voted for this to be pushed to tier 2 because of conversations with the agricultural community and Aggie, where they see perhaps if the language around this alternative is shifted slightly to talk about really targeted areas where we think about ditch improvements that actually we still maintain that groundwater recharge while also benefiting the agricultural community. So feeling that additional study of potentially where those places might be, or like generally how we might benefit both with municipal water supply and helping that community, there could be co-benefits there. But I think it would require maybe a little bit of tweaking to the language of this alternative to be more specific.
Clayton, stand up. Go for Clayton.
Thank you. I would support leaving it in tier 3. I think that to Holly's point, there are some valid conversations to be had, and I think that there are other forums and potential funding sources out there for these sorts of projects that would be a better place than in the construct of municipal water.
Matt, can I share what we have with Becca? Okay, so Becca had provided some input on this. Her comments are that as written, it had ranked low. However, with some revision, it would prove to be a valuable alternative for meeting resiliency goals, as well as to tie into the highly rated 01 alternative, which is the valley storage for mitigation, or the MAR, manage aquifer recharge, as a critical part of achieving that alternative with stipulations. She provided a suggested revision to the description, which is proposed as work with irrigators in the valley to make physical changes to existing canals and ditches to reduce losses in specifically identified and targeted areas. So kind of what Holly was speaking to. She also noted that it supports R4, which is the watershed restoration to improve yield, which was highly rated, as well as O5, which could support quantification of yield that the city needs in order to justify the use of funding sources as stated in R4, so kind of like what Griffin was just mentioning. Lastly, she commented that it also meets the sub-criterion for watershed resilience and ecosystems and preservation of agricultural heritage.
So I guess just to follow up to that, and so is she basically saying that they would prefer to stay tier 3, but if there were changes that could be tier 2?
I don't want to speak for her, but let me see if she proposed moving next. I can see that.
Is that along the lines, Holly, of what the language tweaks that you guys had envisioned? Is that similar to that? And maybe, Jess, you could read that again.
Yeah, I'm going to read it now.
Work with irrigators to make physical changes to existing canals.
The revised description specifically?
Yeah.
Work with irrigators in the valley to make physical changes to existing canals and ditches to reduce losses in specifically identified and targeted areas. And then there's a parentheses that this would support managed aquifer recharge.
Does it go without saying that those conversations with irrigators would only occur with regard to the ditches and canals that the city is co-owner of? Like, I'm wondering if I'm wondering if it goes without saying that the canals and ditches of interest that would be part of this conversation would only be those that the city actually has shares in.
I would suspect, I mean, I wasn't at those meetings, but I would suspect that the irrigators look at it more broadly than that. What you said?
Just because, I mean, I don't know, like, I think once the city starts talking about trying to do anything with ditches that they don't own, that they're not owners of, that's where I could see the conversation getting pretty hairy at best.
My understanding was that it applied to ditches within the city, like city-owned ditches. But maybe there's not a lot of those that.
There's not a lot of those that would make a difference for municipal supply. Yeah, I think the thought in terms of moving the needle for municipal supply would be to offset the losses and use that from Highlight Reservoir, for example. So it would be improvements to ditches that the city does not have a stake in.
I think from a scoping standpoint, we would probably need to work with Zach on the sideboards of that a little bit. But I think at a high level, I see that was envisioned as like a valley-wide effort.
Super interesting and cool stuff.
Obviously, don't want to speak for Rebecca, but I think I would agree with Clayton, perhaps, that these conversations happening in other forums, which they are, and keeping it there might be the best, especially if we're just considering city-owned ditches where it's pretty minimal supply. So I would be comfortable keeping it in tier 3.
I think supporting that too is, it seems like, I mean, the ultimate question we're getting back to again is, you know, whether these guys spend time looking at it. Doesn't sound like, until we've got some projects identified, it seems like it'd be hard to look at that. I mean, without knowing more specific details of where, how, and when.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other forums Holly and Clayton are referred to are better suited to look at that than we are.
So I would support keeping it in tier 3 for that reason.
Without objection, move on. This was an interesting one because it started off as an organic suggestion from the TAC or the PAC, I wasn't sure. And then for reasons that staff and Zach can talk about, it ended up preliminary in the draft hearing at 3. And we had folks come in on the homework and at least one move it to 1 and at least another one move it to 2, which now is a distinction without a difference. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about snow fencing and the rationale for 3?
Sure, I think the rationale is it's a small improvement in yield relative to the scale of not only existing water supply, but when we're talking 50 years, water supply need, like I said, could range from 15 to 35,000 additional acre feet. I think this alternative wouldn't move the needle very much. To the best of my knowledge, there's no precedent for this in terms of water supply on a watershed scale level, on a city level. I'm sure there's certain specific little site-specific applications of this. So for those reasons, that's why the city and we put it in tier 3.
Yeah, kind of chime in there a little bit. Yeah, the staff side, we aren't aware of a similar project applied at like a utility scale. I guess anecdotally, a different life when I was consulting, I worked in Wyoming. Our consulting firm actually designed snow fence for snow mitigation. And the applications that I think I saw it used there, indirectly, I did see that it was producing a lot of supply. I don't think we have environmental conditions that probably would produce much supply here in the Galvin Valley. We really kind of need that blowing snow that Wyoming sees, the Dakota sees. Doesn't mean it wouldn't necessarily work, but I think professionally I had a hard time kind of seeing that as viable for our basin. And then definitely kind of at a city scale.
Need snow first.
And it needs stuff, but it's not. No joke.
Anyone? Holly?
Hi, so I'm picking up a lot of space today. I was one of the ones who moved it from tier 3 to tier 2, and more in the idea of snow mounting. And so I think I had seen a presentation around this being the case in India, where they are utilizing not for large municipalities, but for villages. And there's been some pilot projects up at the Yellowstone Club. I think other ski areas are piloting this, again, not for municipality, as you're both saying, but I think, again, it being a resiliency project that I believe would be relatively low cost for some of that snow farming, snow mounting. That might be kind of separate from snow fencing, perhaps, like kind of creating two separate types of projects, but feel like it is a resiliency project that is low risk, low cost, like we wouldn't regret, why not consider what I guess the cost of considering that's to take into account, of course, the feasibility, but again, in the context of all the others, it feels like a little lift and kind of low-hanging fruit to consider. That was my rationale for moving into tier 2.
I also moved it to tier 2, in part because the sustainability board, in regard to actually snow mounting in particular, really liked it for actually all the reasons Holly already mentioned. They saw it as a very low cost thing. They also saw it as a physical thing, that the community could see this resiliency effort at work potentially. I don't know, it seems like it'll be maybe a little bit out of town, but and then I also saw that it was pretty high on the not this water supply, but the other scores on the community surveys. So yeah, but that's for snow mounting, not snow fencing.
Okay. Clayton, I heard you come off mute.
Yes, I just would, thank you. Certainly would put this in the category of excellent idea. We should pursue it. This probably is not the right venue and pot of money to pursue it because of its relatively low water supply yield. But again, think it's a noble thing that we should be trying to do, and various partners and conservation partners should help, and water user groups might want to pursue this. But I don't think it raises to the level beyond tier 3 here.
Could I share and have
Please.
Becca?
Oh, yeah.
So Becca commented on this as well. She commented that this appears to be an important alternative to explore. It is identified to be a resiliency project and ranks quite high on the alternative list, which Brooke just mentioned. And we as her representing the Aggie, are quite interested in what the analysis shows for the justification of the alternative.
So there's been some good arguments made either way. Does anybody feel strongly enough that it should stay in tier 3 to stay that and feel like we should have a longer discussion about this? Or is the marginal cost of adding this to further analysis worth saying, yeah, let's move it? And I know Alan had a...
Well, I was just going to say, I think I would support leaving it tier 3 for the reasons that Clayton stated, and the fact that for this purpose, for increasing water supply, I mean, I see this as something that does have a lot of benefits, but I don't know how much water it's actually going to make for the city of Bozeman for the water supply purpose. So if we're looking at having these guys spending time focusing on what the city needs, I would say this is pretty low on the list, but it is a good idea. But for those two reasons, I would vote for 3.
I would ditto that in the same sense that great idea, not the value for application for what we're purposed with doing. So I would also just leave it in 3.
I think for the marginal cost, again, just to decide after an analysis whether to endorse or condemn, I'd like to see it in tier 2 and then decide from there.
I guess if I asked you again, how much work is this to analyze this option?
I don't have a great sense for that, but not a huge when you're talking about the cost of Canyon Ferry.
Yeah.
it's peanuts.
Do you have a sense of where this would be used in a watershed?
That's what I was gonna ask, if you would just be looking at the city limits, or would you be?
I think the only way to be impactful would be, excuse me, higher up in the watershed, where the city can't even really control. It has less control over what can and can't be done in those areas.
And is it that useful in Forest Service areas where trees are doing the same thing as what a fence would do?
I don't have a voice here, but again, I'll ask the question. Is anybody willing to fall on their sword to keep it in tier 3?
I love that imagery. Today.
Matt, you said to keep it in tier 3. Is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Okay.
Yeah, the argument holds of if we went round and round on Canyon Ferry and decided we needed more information, is that logic hold here and say, well, maybe we do need a little more information, and so should we dedicate some resources to have a closer look at it?
To me, that logic holds because I've heard some of the arguments against it are that we don't know what the supply could be. Obviously, I think generally we know it's maybe not a lot. But again, coming from that resilience standpoint, recognizing it's something, maybe it's more than we had hoped. So why not? If it's peanuts, why not consider? And every time.
Yes, ma'am.
And are we talking about snow mounding exclusively in the Lyman, Sourdough, and Highlight basins? Or do you want to look at snow fencing?
From the headline, it looks like both.
So snow mounting, when you're referring to that, you would be piling up snow?
And then covering it with like a white tarp, something white, very light colored.
I don't know if it'd be too applicable in Lyman Creek just because of the southern exposure. I mean, you watch the winters go on and that tends to just, I guess, the advantage of snow mounding, if you cover it, that could be beneficial.
Lyman has been shown to have a delayed response as well, so the yield at Lyman is more correlated with the previous year.
Yeah, because of the deeper spring. So the delayed recharge.
Which isn't really arguing one way or the other for.
Yeah, it just is. While I said I could keep it in tier 3, if we want to keep it in tier 2, I'm fine. If we put it in tier 2, I'm fine.
I guess I'm curious if snow mounding would help mitigate like rain on snow events in spring and help the snow. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would be curious for more research on if that would kind of be the case.
How much accessibility up Lyman Creek is there? I mean, I know where the reservoir is, but what about the property above Lyman Reservoir?
Directly above the reservoir is private.
It's private, so you can't even access that area.
Yeah, our access to our springs up there, we have an easement, it's a little small, and it's just for access and maintenance.
Yeah, so you're not even able to do any mounting above the reservoir.
We would have to get it.
Okay.
The city owns property up in Sourdough, higher up in Sourdough, like above Mystic. For context, right, as we're talking about like Forest Service land versus, yeah. So there is city land in that watershed.
Clayton, your hands up.
Yeah, just a quick question for the city staff. Would, and whether or not you can answer this question right now would be part of maybe my answer. Could you spend utility ratepayer dollars on doing this?
On implementing a project such as this?
Projects such as this.
I don't think we would have that information right now to say yes or no.
Okay.
Conceptually, I think there's a fairly large hurdle to get over to say yes to. For what it's worth. Jessica?
I would agree, just that we don't know for sure, but it looks like it could be challenging.
So that might be the first thing that gets ironed out before Zach even gets around to it. And then we could come back to the group and say, turns out it wasn't even possible, or it is possible and Zach's looking at it.
Or we might be able to better answer that after Zach looks at it, so.
True.
It could go either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to get a sense of the group of the passion level for keeping it in 3 and not considering it, and I'm sensing less and less. Are we okay to move it to 2? Clayton either went on mute or came off mute, so.
I came off mute. I would say I feel relatively strongly it should be 3, but I'm not going to die on this hill.
On this mound.
On this mound, yeah, she's right.
Touche.
So I think this is an example of consensus where not all of us love it, but we can live with getting more information. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. Let's talk about water that comes out of your wastewater treatment plant. There are actually 3 of these, right, Zach?
Yes.
And they're kind of related. Do you want to?
Should we start with?
Any way you want to go.
That's fine. So non-potable utility for irrigation and development. The city is already looking at potential reuse for irrigation at like targeted locations. And I think that is, for now, where the city's priorities lie, rather than setting up a purple pipe or to distribute reuse water to like a large area. We do have that non-potable NP 1 or 2, whatever it was, citywide utility utilizing non-potable water. That is risen to tier 2. So yeah, I don't know if the city has more comments on that.
I think you did a great job summing up kind of our thoughts on their Zach. I think I would point to the WRF2 option, irrigation within city limits for select location. For staff, that felt like that one rose to the top, especially in context of these, in context of considering this alternative specifically. I think the other thing that we're aware of too is in utilizing this for new developments in terms of kind of mitigating supply that would be dependent on new development. And so I think that there's a temporal element to that one that's slightly more challenging than when you compare it to the WRF option 2, which we could probably start implementing quickly and immediately.
So there's a water reuse option that is kind of green lighted, and there's these others 3 that.
There's a reuse option that is in tier 1 right now. I think from a staff perspective, feels like it's more practical. Doesn't mean that this isn't practical too, but it felt like it ranked lower for staff.
Which one was WRF2, sorry?
Water reclamation, effluent reuse, irrigation within city limits for select locations.
And for the benefit of the group, do you guys define reuse and recycled water as the same thing?
We haven't talked about recycled water.
Okay. Because I sometimes fall into that, and I wanted to make sure I'm being precise. So
we're characterizing this as reuse.
Okay.
So I'm going to just add some context. It was me, again, who put these from tier 3 into tier 2, not because I necessarily think we should move forward with additional feasibility. It was mostly just one more opportunity to discuss reuse generally and better understand, as you just explained, why there are some reuse options that are ranked sort of in different tiers. So what I'm hearing is some of them maybe are easier to implement, they're further along. We kind of start there and then consider potentially other use options.
Yeah, and reuse is very scalable, right? I mean, once you have a permit to use for irrigation anywhere, it makes it a lot easier from a cost standpoint to reuse in multiple locations. So it's something that, to me, this is almost the same as WRF 1. It's just the scale of how far we distribute reused water.
Can we define reused water?
Treated wastewater effluent.
I just want to make sure it was,
Sorry.
no worries.
So this is all water that's coming from the treatment facility that is now typically just going into the creek.
Correct.
The biggest problem here is distribution from that specific location to, yeah. Where I saw that the fact that the city is using the NP1 through 4 aspect of utilizing irrigation water to take care of these same issues is much more direct. Being able to use ditch water or whatever into new developments.
Yep.
The water's already there. You're not having to go ahead and pump it all the way to the north or the southwest border of the city.
Yeah. Good.
So,
Holly?
So I understand the water policy interim committee at the state legislature is talking about reuse right now. It's one of their considerations, and they're talking about, Clayton probably knows all this, but permitting aspects of that and water rights aspects. And so assuming whatever they're talking about is going to get input to all of these alternatives here. I think, again, from the Watershed Council's perspective, thinking about the in-stream flow that the water reclamation facility provides, especially during certain times of year, is really important for fish populations and downstream use. And so just, it looks like in 2013, there were some reuse options, the alternatives that were included, and that environmental criteria had sort of like in-stream flow analysis still needed, and so wasn't sure if there had been additional analysis that has happened since then, or if that in-stream flow piece is still something that needs to be analyzed.
Question in general, sorry, related to this. Are these water reclamation facility effluent reuse options kind of one of those ways to keep water here before it goes to Canyon Ferry? Is that something, like I know in-stream use, but that goes into the Missouri.
Eventually it goes into the Missouri. Yep.
And we have 3 water reclamation facility effluent items in tier 2. Would that serve to cover the other issues, or to?
I think so.
Okay.
Holly, to answer your question, not that I'm aware of, but I feel like the answer is yes. I think city staff and or other consulting firms have a better handle on that now than we did in 2013. But I guess I can't answer.
Yeah, we're reluctant to speak on it since it's not a topic I'm well versed on. I listened to the recent WAC meeting, and it feels like the conversation is progressing. But beyond that, I'm nervous to really comment.
How many were there as far as this water?
6 or 7.
Well, no, previously, like in 2013.
Oh.
I'm just curious if this is something that has gained some traction from the last.
It definitely gained some traction from the last.
Which is really cool.
And so WRF2, which is in the upper tier, and it's not as part of this discussion, but indicating that it calls for the irrigation of city parks and golf courses. So that golf course is more specifically referencing Riverside, and that, which is kind of part of the ongoing negotiation. Is that right?
I'm not privy to those negotiations, to be honest with you.
I think Riverside will be an interesting component if, when analyzing that, whether it's like Riverside's outside city limits.
Yes.
And so I think that will be an element to when analyzing that location, that will have to probably get discussed a little bit more.
Because I know Sean is in discussion with them about the mechanics of making that happen. But isn't it true that just recently, within the last month or two, that Riverside Water Treatment Facility they were tagged, and so now that it's now been piped?
Yeah, we completed a lift station project there, so their wastewater does go to our plant now.
Okay.
Yeah. On the water supply side, I think that they're still on their own water system.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I was just gonna say, since I think I was the sole person who considered or like suggested moving this one, and I am fine keeping it in tier 3, having had this discussion. I think the statement I just made there is that we would be looking at both for the other reuse options that are in tier 1 and tier 2 currently, that analysis of the in-stream flow in order to be able to support those in the final. That being said, the next one on your next slide, I wondered if, oh, sorry, no, not this one.
The final one?
The final.
Do you feel the same way about this one?
I feel the same way about this one. But the final one.
So I'm gonna move along on that second one, because you indeed were it was you, and then on this one, you have a friend.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I'm sure.
Okay.
There's two people that wanted to do it. Excellent, yeah. So I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I think the thought here perhaps, which I wanted to run by the group, was that I think maybe we had considered this one bumping into tier 3 because we don't currently have much industrial use. And I wondered if we're thinking about what we currently have instead of, 30, 50 years out, and especially data centers, and if actually we might have additional heavy industrial water users that we want to consider thinking about this and with more feasibility.
And I'll be clear, that point for discussion, I think, was that your comment in there?
I added a comment, something like
Good,
that.
okay.
That was my thinking as well. Big tech is moving fast and furious before regulation stuff could possibly descend, if ever. And they're already moving in Montana, and so I was concerned about that and having a plan in place for looking at 50 years in the future.
An AI data center located in Bozeman would be just an impossible thing to do for a lot of reasons when they look at the other places that they would prefer to do.
Yeah.
And not to say it's not
and that's true. But I think this is an important point, and I'm ready to move it into tier 1 or 2. And not because of data center, but because the place is growing and things are coming.
I think, didn't we talk about the city would restrict industrial facilities that would use too much water based on what we have available?
So I sought clarification on that to see if there was a question like, can the city just say no to AI data centers, for example? Basically, we're not sure. The commission, of course, would have the final say in like an application like that. The commission, in making their decision, would likely, consider our resources, and have a decision to make on how to prioritize those. But we don't know for sure, what their ability is to just say yay or nay otherwise, and so I don't have like a great answer to that right now.
So what you're saying is that if some industrial facility came in and said, we're going to be very water hungry in our operation, and they then would have to submit it to the planning department and for approval, and currently you're thinking that there is not something that would be a blockade to say they can't use in excess of so many gallons per minute of water in their operation. They would have to go to the city commission for final approval.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
I hope I'm right.
Yeah.
I do know that there's nothing in code that says if you use over X, you can't develop your project.
So in the recent Uniform Development Code, there was nothing dealing with industrial use restrictions.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Can you speak to the planning side more? I know you lived in that world once, on like, would it go to the commission or on the spot?
Process-wise, I'm not sure. I've been removed enough from that, or glad, that I'm not sure.
Mercifully,
Happily
sounds like.
so.
Yeah, less gray hairs. I guess one point to add there is within our codes, where one tool is our water adequacy code, which says when development comes in, they need to offset their municipal demands. We have, there's a couple options: exchange of water rights, efficiency offsets, or paying cash. So that's right now the vehicle that we would review a new project that came in. They would have to satisfy that code. As far as kind of the process element, I'm not totally sure. We need a representative from planning to provide us all answer.
And I'll also just point out that the description here, it's broad, right? It could be a policy, right? We could change code so that if that AI data center came through, we would have some limits, right? So there's different, I'm not sharing my opinion or anything, I just wanted to point out that there's different ways in which this could be, like, I guess, crafted and ultimately recommended depending on what the group's goals were with this type of idea.
I'll just say a couple of things as well. I know that for large corporations, a lot of them are implementing on-site circular water systems for various reasons, including like PR and sustainability reporting. So they would probably, having a policy would probably be a helpful thing versus nothing, versus a whole city utility. The other thing is that the university is, I've been in conversations about this quantum computing thing, and they want economic development, and they want it here for manufacturing. So that's been on my mind as well. That apart from AI data centers and stuff, there's a push to do more manufacturing here. So I would still advocate to move it to do some research on either the delivered treated wastewater and or the policy.
So are there any strongly held beliefs that we should keep it in tier 3?
I'm going to change my position on this based on this discussion, because I think to go from 3 to at least 2 to get more information, to keep this further discussion, because this really bothers me with the idea of that the city may be lacking any sort of teeth in restricting how much water a facility can come in and use and put the rest of us at risk. And so I think this needs to be brought up and at least continue the discussion and figure out how do we protect our water against someone coming in and just wanting to just take more than their fair share.
I think I would add to that too. I mean, it seems like, there's two things I can see here. One is that the treatment plant processes a lot of water, so we're talking about a significant amount of water potentially that could be reused. But I also think that probably from the public side, that I think a lot of people would see this as a viable option, a way to deal with the water use. And so having a little bit more information, I would say on all three of them, seems logical to me, so I think I would support it. I would call it tier 2.
Can we have consensus at tier 2? From 3 to 2? Is there any?
I just want to clarify what Alan just said. When you said more information on all 3, do you mean all 3 of the reuse things that we just looked at? Or were you?
Yeah, we're just this one.
Okay.
So I think you're in the minority on that one. I think we had.
Well, I
Holly,
would support that.
oh geez, Holly found a friend. Holly found a friend.
I'm wanting to be sensitive to Zach's team a little bit, so, but I brought that for a reason, yeah. So.
Well, yeah, let me back up. I guess, yeah. I was really only speaking, I guess, to, I didn't see the outside city limits on this one. Seems like for 1 and 4 though, for the industrial, Is that what you're saying? I mean, I'm saying, you know, if we're gonna look at the reuse from the city wastewater treatment plant, how it's used and where it goes is part of it, but I would assume a lot of the analysis is gonna be similar, isn't it?
Various levels of treatment, obviously direct potable, have much higher treatment, much more costly treatment than irrigation.
But these three though, none of these are direct though, right? So non-potable irrigation outside city and industrial.
Gotcha. Yeah, did we already talk, I had to run to the restroom, did we already talk about the negatives, perception and reality of reuse for the ag community? There was, I know Rebecca had some opposition to that alternative due to perceived or real poor water quality or irrigation.
I guess I want to do a clarification because I just saw the difference here in potable versus non-potable. And here's, I don't know the water quality level that industrial commercial users would require in their equipment operations if it had to be to potable quality versus non-potable. Because I guess my push would be, if you're now trying to go ahead and take the effluent and raise it to another tier of having it acceptable for potable use, that's a much larger expense versus my thought is to just bring it up to non-potable quality for their industrial commercial use.
I think if it were indoor use, which it most certainly would be,
yeah,
it would need to be significantly more treatment.
Okay, and that's out of my understanding.
I will just, WRF5 is listed in Tier 2. Water reclamation facility of reuse direct potable. So it's already in Tier 2 of that.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the three at the end of our table here. It's got three of them.
And Holly, you'd like to move all three of them into Tier 2?
I guess I brought them up because I wasn't clear on the rationale behind putting those ones in Tier 3 and the other reuse ones being up higher. So I just wanted to have this discussion. I would be most pressing, I guess, for moving the industrial use one into Tier 2. The other two, from my understanding, are kind of like perhaps coming along after we do these other reuse options. So I'm less like stuck on the other two moving forward at this point.
So here's how it felt like it shook out to me, is that keep this one in 3.
Because the city is already looking at this. That's what I wrote down. And definitely gained some traction since 2013. Okay.
Which one are we talking about?
WRF1,
Okay, yeah.
non-potable utility for irrigation and new development.
Currently slated in Tier 1 to be analyzed.
Well, not specifically for new development.
Oh, sorry,
Just
yeah.
for targeted.
That's where I was confused.
Targeted applications.
Which is WRF2.
Correct.
So this one on the table right now, this one stays at 3. This one stays at 3. And this one moves to 2.
Yes.
All right. So I think we found consensus on that. Congratulations. We have moved through the ones we needed to talk about. So McKenna, would you mind sharing your screen on the motion, and then we'll move to the updated table? So what, I'll put it up, I'll have her put it up on the screen, but this, McKenna's been following along in the background and has been updating this list here. So you see the ones, NP1 moved from 3 to 2, and the last one, work for move from 3 to 2. Does this reflect everybody's understanding of our consensus today? Seeing heads nodding. McKenna, we go to the motion slide, please. So we're looking for a motion.
I move to approve the revised set of tiers for further analysis.
I second.
Looking for public comment. All right, so I think we should have go back to the motion, please. We have no public comments, we're gonna go back to the motion. So all in favor of moving to approve the revised set of tiers for further analysis, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes, and Zach has his marching orders.
That's how easy that was. We got 10 minutes to start. Kind of wondering after the first one took as much time as it did. Can we talk about when you were thinking about getting back together? You said 10 weeks would put it somewhere around the last week in July.
I can chime in on that. So what we're planning, and am I stepping on your toes?
No.
Okay. So our plan right now is to reconvene next in July to talk about conservation measures. So you guys thought you were like done, but we didn't have to do all this with conservation. But that'll be an easier look. So July is going to be focused on conservation measures. And then the thought currently is that we would like to, yes, meet with you all before we start doing a lot of those open houses. And so I guess maybe I'll pass it back to Zach now, but the soonest we would meet about this would be in August, if not September.
Yeah, August, September.
Okay.
Exactly would be appropriate to say though, in July, we're estimate on timeline.
For sure, right?
Yeah. Like a lot of those results.
When are you thinking of doing the public comment, which now sounds like it's gonna be September or October?
Well, our thought at this point is to engage the public kind of, more thoroughly, or if you will, after you all have another look at these and come up with, maybe more certainty around what you all are prioritizing. The thought being exactly what you brought up earlier, that a list of 40 alternatives is just way too much information. And so we wanted to try to come up with something a little bit more reasonable to engage on, basically.
Just for planning purposes, could we possibly meet before July 16th?
If we want
And I
to do
wanted
that,
to thank everybody for that discussion. That
can we not meet in August?
yeah.
I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah, I know, I was like,
I'm on the West Coast camping for the full month.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Beth, would you be able to log in virtually if we didn't do it before the 13th?
For the 16th, but yeah.
Okay. I'll see what we can do. Finding a room is always a battle, so I'll have to see what options.
Yeah. And give the library a shot.
And I'm gonna step on your toes here.
Okay.
I would think that virtual option, because summertime's hard for everybody, and there's not going to be any decisions per se from the group, right? So, no? Okay.
TBD.
Okay, TBD, never mind. So I won't say the second part about recording it and people watch it at their convenience, so. But yes, so what's the process for putting a date on the calendar in July before the 18th?
Me trying to find a room, but if we all want to talk about like absolute yeses or nos on dates, I would love to hear that, and then I'll do my best to accommodate everyone. It was, challenging too this time, so that's why Becca couldn't be here.
I'm committed that last week of July.
Yeah, me too. Me as well.
How much homework are we gonna have?
What's our homework?
Between now and then?
Yeah,
No.
okay, doesn't matter.
Some of us.
That was brutal.
Okay, so not the last
Can
week
always
of
speak for
July?
myself.
It's before the 16th.
Yeah, okay.
All right, are we adjourned? We good?
So.
Thank you all so much for your insights and your patience and your brain power on this. It can be painful in the moment, but coming out of it, I hope you feel as good as I do about what we're doing here and where this is headed. So thank you all. See you in the summertime.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.